the women's international footy. Obviously, the Wallaroos took on the Black Ferns at the same time that the under-20s took on Ireland, so I didn't see it all live. But this was a game I was really looking forward to as an opportunity for the Wallaroos. You know, they've obviously just had their Super Rugby season, their Super Rugby AU season, being very competitive again. Queensland kind of pushing through and having a fantastic year to add a lot more depth. We had our international players coming back from the Northern Hemisphere, including Arabella McKenzie, who won player of the tournament up there. So obviously in fantastic form. The internationals a lot of them were on the bench and not starting, including McKenzie. But New Zealand, or the Black Ferns on the other side of things, I think they had 6 debutants in the side, just, you know, this big turnout in the World Cup. I thought maybe riding a bit of a high because as phenomenal as they were in the Women's World Cup, they were probably the second or third best team there that managed to jag the win. I know that's not going to resonate with all the New Zealand teams, but, you know, that's how I think that most people would have felt about it. Phenomenal performance from them, but I thought it was going to be pretty tight, and it was not, guys.
No, look, we were speaking of the bad news for the Southern Hemisphere. Just bad news for Australia in general. 0-50 was the final scoreline for the Wallaroos, and
in Australia.
Sorry,
in Australia with potentially the biggest crowd ever in Australian women's rugby.
It was the biggest, 7,000 something.
Yeah. There's not much. There's no real way. Like, you guys are very good at putting a positive spin on things. Very difficult to put a positive spin on a 50-0 scoreline.
I can put one positive.
Okay,
and it's almost a negative. That although the Kiwis had 7 debutants, we didn't have a single one. So we're getting these players. Although
there's my boy finding a light in the darkness.
Mate, they're spread across the world, getting some experience.
That's darkness and the light, mate.
It's both. It's light, dark, light.
We don't even know that.
But we need these girls playing together. They're spreading across the world, getting some game time overseas, bringing it back home. But we need them all returning home and playing together. So despite that, they were back on Australian shores and playing together. So more game time together. I think we see them keep moving forward. This was not it.
I've got the real writing on the wall here. I think it's that if Australia does not act very, very soon to professionalise their women's program, we are going to be so far behind that we will be stuck as a Tier 2 nation. And I genuinely mean that. The riches on offer in the other rugby codes right now is so significant compared to what the Aussie sides are doing that it's just, it's on a complete another level. Piper Duck, the captain of the Waratahs, who were seen as the favourites for the Super Rugby tournament, is off playing in the women's NRL. And instead, we haven't got her physicality in the forward pack for the Wallaroos. Now, the forward pack for the Wallaroos was completely outmuscled to the point where our electric backs never even got the ball. We need to be keeping every single player. We need to be drawing. If you think we've only got a few sides, we should be drawing players across from the WNRL at the moment, where they've got so much competition and they have to pay so many more players. Like, it's just a no-brainer. We should be so far ahead. It's incredibly disappointing to see how slow we've been moving on this. And I know they keep saying, there's progress and this is something that's going to evolve over time, but the opportunity is about to be completely lost. It's just something that we can't go on at the rate we are. And hopefully this is the kick up the arse to say now is the time that we need to invest a hell of a lot more, because it's only going to get worse if we don't.
Yeah, I agree. It does feel dire, doesn't it? And it would be a real miss, particularly given that I feel like in Australia we've been a leader in pioneering the women's game. With like some of the first Super Rugby competition, things like that. Like we've had Josephine Sukar at Buildcorp has really kind of channeled a lot of money and kind of really held her own against Rugby Australia. I think they withdrew sponsorship once or twice because Rugby Australia didn't deliver on promises and things like that. So it is kind of really sad for us to have been pushing it forward and now falling behind. It does feel that way. But look, talking about the game for mine, I watched the highlights of it. The one thing that stood out for me was, I'm not sure I think she was a debutant, but don't quote me on this. The inside centre for New Zealand,
19-year-old.
Yeah, Brunt, she was absolutely crushing people all game. Just an absolute weapon, just putting hits on. I think you nailed it when you said the Wallaroos got absolutely outplayed physically, just got outdone physically. The Silver Ferns just absolutely crushed them. But for me, Brunt, who scored 2 tries and just absolutely destroyed that inside centre channel, was the standout player for mine.
I think the saving grace here is that we've got 2 games now in the Northern Hemisphere against USA and Canada, who a few years ago were at the pinnacle of the sport. I think they're in a pretty similar position to what the Wallaroos are. I don't think that they're making any kind of great leaps. I could be out of date here, but that was the sense I definitely got from the World Cup last year. So unless there's been radical change, I think they're going to be in a similar level to the Wallaroos. We have to win at least one of those games to get a position to qualify for the World 15's Tier 1 competition at the back end of this year for the Women's Rugby International Comp. And that's going to be a huge moment where, again, the exposure for our girls, who I honestly think are in huge trouble if they do get into that, they're going to have some big score lines against them. But it's going to be great for their development until they have a professional program. So really, really important that we win one of those. And I just really hope that the USA and Canada are lagging behind the rest of the world like we are.
Yeah, look, I mean, the biggest thing is, like, if we draw some similarities to the men's game, I mean, you look, France has got a home World Cup at the moment, and France have really been able to invest and develop their pathways and their players so that they're ranked first leading into this World Cup in terms of who's the most likely going to win the men's World Cup. We have the Women's World Cup only 2 years after the men's, 2029. We need to be investing in these girls now. We need to be able to having a development pathway that gets these girls to the pinnacle of the game as fast as we can, because when they're playing in Australia, in maybe one of the only chances they'll ever get to play a World Cup in Australia, they need to be competitive. And that's how we're going to get young girls inspired to play. So it's almost on par at the moment. We need to be investing, and it needs to be as big a priority as the men's game, because both of these 2 World Cups that we have here, we need to be successful for the game moving forward.
I think our top 23 have to be fully professional next year, $40,000, $50,000 a year, to the point where, they're not having to hold significant jobs. Look, the reality is $40,000, $50,000, you kind of do need another job, to be honest, particularly in Sydney. But at least then they can do some very part-time stuff and train full-time.
But Harry, maybe the plan is make them full-time professionals, give them 50,000, and then move them to Perth, where they're almost, they're doing well over in Perth. The house costs only 100,000. They'll be doing well over there. What do you reckon?
That's true. Yeah, I'm all for it. Base them in Perth.
It wouldn't be an episode of the Draft Rugby Show unless Nelson shut on the Southers or Western Australia. So
you got to do someone, or the Kiwis, but they're just too good for us.
Very good.